Greetings, everyone. And actually, I'm going to do one more thing with the picture here. I'm going to have on speaker view what I really wanted. I'm going to actually stop the recording while I patch this up a little. Well, never mind. So it's on speaker view. What that means is that if you speak, you will drop something. You will become the main picture on this video. So if you feel free to speak whenever you want to, but if you want to be safe, that the background noises aren't part of the recording or that you don't come up as the main picture, you can mute yourself and unmute yourself when you have something you want to share. So today we're going to talk about narcissism, and we're going to talk about narcissism as both in the normal range and as a psychopathology. But this is not narcissism on the psychological level. And remember, we're calling the whole paradigm the paradigm of narcissism. So this is the inner circle, the inner psychological, personal aspect of the concentric realms in which what I'm calling narcissism expresses itself in our lives, and is part of what we've been calling, I've been calling the great mistake. And then I'm going to transition from that into talking about grief, because grief is essentially the healing of narcissism. And I hope that before I'm done, that'll be clear what I mean by that. So you can't talk about narcissism without starting with he who shall not be named. That brings up a lot of resistance for most of us, because he who shall not be named has already taken up all the oxygen in the room, and we begrudge him our attention. And we particularly begrudge it because we don't want to confirm his core belief, actually his only core belief, which is that everything is about him. However, it's worth our time to do it, because in some way it can be our revenge. Hang on a second. Peter, what was that?
Don't worry about it, Bob.
Okay, I'm going to put on gallery
view.
Look
at it later.
If I could pin myself, which I don't seem to be able to do right now. I don't know why. Don't know why.
If you're on gallery view, then everybody's there. It's just that you get a green frame when you're speaking.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I'm going to put it. I want a close up of me when I'm speaking. So it's anyway, we're on speaker view, and whoever speaks will be in the main picture. So acknowledging how much we begrudge the attention that he who shall not be named has stolen from us, it's also our revenge, because we can learn something from now I'm going to use the name Trump experience. We can learn something really important as a culture from the Trump experience, and he can't. He is incapable of learning from his experience, but we can, and we need to. So let's consider it our revenge rather than our kowtowing to the idea that everything is about him. And it's not all about him, because he was made possible by the narcissism in our culture in general. He's a manifestation of it. He's not the cause of it in some way. And so I don't want to personalize the problem. I just want to use the personal as an example of the problem, right? It's not if we get rid of Trump, we've solved the narcissism inherent in our system. So I'm not trying to elevate him to the cause of everything. He's a symptom of it. But if we understand that symptom, then we're better able to understand what I'm calling the great mistake. And the basic deal is why he's really helpful, because Trump is the great mistake incarnate. He's not the only one, but as a prime example, he is the great mistake incarnate. And so he can be a learning experience for us. I had an experience with my son once where this was Christmas table, and I talked about some relative, some phrase that we use in the family over and over again because we think it's funny. But we don't even know the name of the relative, how many generations ago, who we're quoting. So I was saying how funny that was. So my son says, well, what do you think you'll be remembered for? What quote? And I said, well, I should ask you that. And he said, well, I think it would be your expression, another effing growth experience. And when I heard that, I felt really, really good because, and the effing is really important because it's not like, oh, everything is there for a purpose and everything is to help you grow. The hell with that. But if it's happening, it might as well be an effing growth experience, or, you know, might as well use it as best you can. So Trump is an FGO. Trump is a powerful FGO for all of us. And if we use him that way, that's a good use of him. So Trump told us everything we need to know about him, everything, long before he was nominated, when he said, I could stand in the middle of Broadway and shoot someone and nobody would mind, and everybody would still, all my followers would still be up, there for me, would protect, would I wouldn't lose any followers. I think that's what it was. I wouldn't lose any followers. And so if you break that down, I'm saying he told us everything we needed to know. What that means is, one, the effect on the other guy, like being dead, isn't important. Anything Trump does is okay. The reason everything he does is okay is because it plays well with his followers. There's no other moral consideration. If it doesn't undermine his success, then it's okay. And his following is so absolutely devoted that he can do whatever he wants. And what that ultimately means is that he's exempt from the law of consequences. And that concept, being exempt from the law of consequences, is critical for how we operate as a society, how powerful people operate in our society, operate as a species, believing that we are exceptional and so therefore some way exempt from the law of consequences. But the thing is, if you are exempt from the law of consequences, you cannot learn. That's pretty clear, right? Very basic and simple. If there are no consequences to what you do, if you're exempt from the law of consequences, you cannot learn. And so, as I think I just implied, basically, that's in some way a pretty good picture of how we as a species and we as a civilization have been conducting ourselves on the planet and with each other. So, as I said, Trump is the great mistake in the flesh, the great mistake incarnate. And we as a nation are experiencing on a national level, we still are, and particularly when he was president, we still are. But when he was president, we are experiencing on the national level what anyone who has had to organize their life around a powerful narcissist, that experience. So, which is, very often the experience of abused wives or mistresses or women. So the question then is, how does such a creature get created? We need to know that because we're probably creating them en masse at some level, even if this is a particularly glorious and entitled version of it. So the most important thing to understand there is that I'm not saying anything that's brilliantly new to you guys, but nevertheless, to really understand, narcissism is not love of self, right? The top version is narcissism is someone who loves themselves too much. Okay, but a narcissist does not love themselves. Narcissism is a defense against an utter and terrifying emptiness inside the person. Inside, the experience is that there is a vacuum. There's no authentic self in there. There's no emotional core. There's no moral compass inside. And if you think about that, that is utterly terrifying. To be utterly empty inside. All have emptiness inside, and there's good uses for the concept of emptiness, but just to have no center, no core, no authentic self, and no moral compass inside is a horrifying and terrifying existence. And what that means, so narcissism is a defense against that. With no authentic self inside, a narcissist erects a elaborate facade. Erects an elaborate facade, and there is no self. There's just an elaborate facade, essentially. And one way you could say that is that as a substitute for having an inner self, the pathological narcissist we're talking about, so high level, erects an elaborate facade. And the way to look at that is to say, not that the clothes have no emperor, not that the emperor has no clothes, but that the clothes have no emperor. The clothes have no emperor. There's no one inside. Not a real feeling, authentic human being inside. So the closest thing to experiencing himself as love, or as love worthy, for that level of narcissist is the reviews for his facade. Does his facade get good reviews? Does it receive adulation? Does the facade and that is the substitute for being loved by one's authentic self. It's a very different feeling from what it is to experience the love of someone who really knows you and cares about you and is connecting to a deeper part of yourself. Now, but scurrying around to keep one's facade up and constantly checking one's reviews to make sure one is okay, that one exists actually in the extreme term, takes an enormous and a constant and a desperate amount of energy to keep up. That's why Trump is an energizer bunny, right? It takes compulsive, enormous, desperate energy to keep that up. And the reason is that it's false food, and false food does not feed a hunger. You're never satisfied with that false food. And in that sense, it's essentially a delusion. It's a delusion because that level of narcissist, the pathological narcissist, sociopathic narcissist, let's say, the sociopathic level of narcissism, cannot accept any reality that doesn't confirm his self-image. Cannot confirm it. Cannot countenance any reality in which he loses. That simply cannot be real. That cannot happen. Because then it's the delusion and not a lie, because he's compelled to believe what supports his narcissism and to deny what doesn't. Because the image is all he's got. His existence depends on it, with no authentic existence inside. If all you have is your narcissistic image as a winner, to lose it is to be annihilated. That's the real emotion. I'm using very extreme language. That's the level of desperation. It is if you lose, if your image is rejected, you are annihilated. Now, having seen Trump lose, and then all of us probably, well, most of us probably going like, what is it like for a guy like this to lose? How can he handle it? You know, his sister wrote stuff about it too. How he'll be utterly destroyed if he to lose. But what that doesn't do is not understand the desperate resilience, the utter resilience, because if you lose, you just make up a reality that you prefer. And you believe it. You are compelled to create a reality that is acceptable to you. So there's this period of just being confused and depressed and all that stuff went on just for weeks, as far as I know. And then you recover because you simply reestablish the reality that's acceptable to you. And it's really important. This is not a lie. It's a delusion. It's the belief that believing makes it so. And that being that this level of narcissist is the center of the universe, what he believes is so. Believing makes it so. And if you can develop a cult of people who will agree that believing makes it so. You remember very early on, there was this interview with, I can't think of her name now, a woman who was his campaign manager, right? And she said, she used the expression alternate reality. And the news guy said, alternate facts. She says, well, there's alternate facts. When he was caught in a complete, when he was saying that there were more people in the crowd at his inauguration than Obama's, right? And everybody said, huh? There's pictures. You know, it was just obviously not true. And she was challenged on that. His Conway is her name, his publicist at the time. She was challenged on that, and she said, well, there's alternate facts. And the news guy says, alternate facts are lies, aren't they? And she's, I don't know how she exactly skated around that. But the concept of alternate facts is really, you can choose the facts that you want. And what that amounts to is, and then why that's chilling and terrifying if you get into it, is it really amounts to an attack on consensual reality. It's not that there's life is subjective. People have different points of view. But the idea that there's basically no consensual reality that's a ground from which we can start talking about things and figuring out what to do, that you can just make up whatever you want. And if you're in the Trump team, it's just it's a loyalty oath. You will believe that reality. Scary. Now it was difficult when there was a consensual reality, and it was whatever Walter Cronkite said in my youth. And it's true, that was an establishment reality, and it was important to say, you know what, that's just a view of reality. But the idea that there is none is crazy making. It's lamplighting the whole nation. So anyway, Trump invites his followers into a fake reality that is basically crazy making, and there's no anchor in reality to be able to then talk about stuff. So let me see. A delusion is not a lie. He's compelled to believe it. He's resilient because he has an amazing ability, desperately, to reconstitute the reality to fit his psychological needs. Now, my wife does this, is a therapist and worked with kids, does this wonderful little talk. She does this. This is the talk Trump didn't get. He never got the talk. She says, now, Trumpy, you lost this time. But that's okay. People lose. And when you lose, it doesn't mean you're no good or not a wonderful person. You just lost, because sometimes people lose. And when you win, it doesn't mean you're better than everybody else. And everybody else is nothing, and you're the winner. People win, people lose, and you're still all right. I love you, and you are all right. And I accept you who you are, whether you win or you lose. And it's important when you lose to honor and help the people who won celebrate their victory, so that makes them feel good. So this is what you say at different stages. And this is, it's what you say to your little leaguer, Anyway, it's the talk he didn't get. So now I'm going to go to child development, which is basically back to how does this kind of monster get created? What gets decided in some way very early in child development, very early, like an infant, is essentially the basic question we all face in some degree is, am I in the world okay? Am I okay? Is the world okay? Which is another way of saying, can I and the world get along? And of course, an infant cannot say, my needs are really fine, your world just isn't meeting them. It's not my fault that my parents don't know how to respond to my needs, right? That distinction doesn't exist. The world and me are still one thing, and we're either an acceptable thing or not. So the basic core question in some way for all of us is, can me and the world get along? Which is the same thing as, am I basically okay? And how that gets taught is basically that the infant's needs are met. They are responded to. When the infant cries, something happens. When the infant laughs, someone laughs with them. When the infant reaches for something, someone reaches back. So there's this back and forth, which essentially says, you and me, largely the parent, we're in this together. We have a shared reality. We understand each other. We care about each other. It's actually important that that's imperfect. That is to say, it's not that the kid doesn't just learn. So the kid doesn't just learn that the world will perfectly respond to my needs the second I have them. For instance, the child cries, and let's say the mother comes and changes the diaper. Well, maybe that isn't it. Maybe the child is hungry. So, but what the child gets to learn is that somebody is trying to do something, and sooner or later something will be done. And it won't be perfect. So it's not the world responds to my needs just like that. It's just me and the world ultimately get along. We have a well-meaning relationship. But the basic feeling that you're going to be attended to and that the world responds to is where the fundamental sense is that you're okay. And that's where you develop an authentic self, an authentic relationship to your emotions. Your emotions are okay. And they're okay because your authentic self is essentially watered by relationship. The fact that that my feelings and actions are related to getting attention is the water that grows them and that allows me to integrate them and to build an authentic self. Now, there's some horrible cases with orphans during the war. I think it was in Romania, there's famous studies that kids they had masses of orphans, and they went into orphanages that couldn't remotely take care of their needs. And basically those kids came out very flat. Another horrible example of that, if you raise a kid in a closet, the kid will have no affect. It will not smile because nothing happens when it smiles. It will not cry because it'll cry until it realizes that it's never reflected. So the child will not cry, will not express anger. It just will be flat because it's never learned that there's a resonance in the world with what's going on. It's never learned that it's in relationship. So the basic idea that relationship is a good thing comes out of a decent relationship with nurturers. It's one of the reasons why now with abused kids, they're not ignored, but who've been beaten, and in other words, they retreat from relationship, and teachers have a great deal of difficulty. Teachers go like, what's going on with this kid? I can't get him to care. If I give him compliments, he doesn't care. If I'm mad at him, he doesn't care. Basically using relationship as a way of rewarding doesn't work, because the kid has never bought into the idea that relationship is a good thing to do. And if that's not there, then it's very hard. Then your work is really cut out for you in terms of how to develop a relationship with this child, and the child's work is cut out for it, how to live without knowing how to do relationship. These are repairable things, but they're things that would be easy if you got them early on, and very, very hard to remediate later. Now, some level of this so when the child's feelings and emotions are not accepted and are either ignored or ruthlessly attacked, an authentic self doesn't get to grow, to be nurtured, and a false self gets erected. Now, there's a very natural, normal level of this. That's what personal growth and therapy is about. So if you grew up in a family, for instance, where anger was not allowed, it's likely that, and this I'm talking about normal life, it's likely that anger will be hard for you, because anger was not acceptable and would be rejected. And then your personal growth, and that's what your therapy would be about, but your personal growth is to allow and accept your angry part, that your angry part went into the shadows, because that's not allowed. So to nurture it and bring it out and incorporate it so you have a wholer self is part of what growth and health is. That also means bringing out in a way where not where you're murdering people, but bringing it out gradually, so that that you are in control of it. So you get to be angry and you get to feel angry, but you have a relationship with that anger, where the anger doesn't just explode out because you have you're either in denial of it. I'm never angry, then you blow up, right? So that's why the healthy growth process is acknowledging, bringing in, and incorporating the angry part, if that was the shadow you grew up with, and having that become part of a wholer self. Now, but it depends on the family. It can be the opposite. There can be a family in which what's absolutely not allowed is being weak. And then if you're weak and timid and quiet, that's totally disrespected in that family. So you probably grew up, it's very easy for you to get mad and shake your fists and yell at people, because that was allowed, but being weak and vulnerable is not. And then you have to work on incorporating and respecting and allowing your vulnerable side to be incorporated into your wholeness. So that's a natural process, right? But in the extreme case, and now, there were books written by his sister and a lot of stuff about Trump. I gave this exact same talk before I knew anything about his personal history. If you're a therapist, you don't have to know anything about his personal history to know what happened to him. There's only one way you get that way. And so if any expression of your authentic emotion is seen as a weakness and ruthlessly destroyed and attacked, that will accumulate to an annihilation of any authentic emotional core. Annihilation of a genuine self and a genuine internal moral compass and a general internal emotional experience of selfhood. That will be destroyed. And then with the consequences we already talked about. And only one thing which is accepted, which is to dominate and to win. Everything else is stamped out. You can never be vulnerable. You can never lose. And on the social level, then that would amount to, if your believing if what you believe is true because you're Trump, and therefore your followers have to believe it because they're loyal followers, then we're back to talking about a delusional attack on conventional reality and basically a loss of the ability to be in relationship. So I'm now going to check in with folks and then transition to grief and what the healing and redemptive power of grief is, and how that's essential as essentially the cure of narcissism, the ability to feel and to grieve. But I am going to put this on gallery view and just see if anything people want to say. Does this sound like it fits your experience?
Yes. Absolutely. I'm thinking about something I said where I said something along the lines of that I believe that if we don't accept our helplessness and what we're being presented as helplessness with all that we are told is going on in the world, and that if we don't buy into it, we're taking power away from it. And I'm just wondering, I see a lot. This is very impactful for me because I've spent my entire life trying to recover from my experiences, and I thought I was doing okay. Well, we'll see. Okay, that's all. I just opened up some questions for me. Thank you.
You're welcome, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, I guess.
I would think it would help you feel less alone, though. If the whole nation.
Oh, Trump and I are out there together.
Yeah.
No.
Well, maybe you're special. Maybe he just did it to you.
Yeah. No.
No. Good. Very healthy response.
There is a way where out of having very difficult circumstances, we can develop greater compassion and greater depth and greater wisdom. Yeah. I mean, it is possible.
It is possible.
Yeah. Some of us work on it, you know.
Oh my God. Lovely. Yeah.
I'm wondering, Bob, I remember I have like 3 friends who are psychologists, and was in the field. I'm not a psychologist, but I remember at some point, there was articles coming out saying, you cannot diagnose somebody from a distance.
Bullshit.
And all my psychologist friends said, that's bullshit. I mean, this is so extreme. You can diagnose it, right? But I've seen other people, I think, obviously narcissism in the personality and in the person's life will take different forms. And I mean, extreme narcissism. And we used to talk about the concept of, I don't even know if it's real, negative narcissism, where the person, like you described, is neglected or abused and never gets a positive sense of self and is always unworthy. And then they attach to that they're
the unworthiest person.
They're not dominant.
In the world.
The what?
The unworthiest person in the world.
Yeah. And in a way, it can become, I don't know if we call it narcissism, but a self-focus, of course, that is very self-defeating. And I don't know what you think about that, but then the other issue, and you
I'd
said,
love to
and I
respond
believe
to
it's
that. Should I
correct.
wait for the other issue or respond to
Okay.
that one?
No,
Um,
go ahead.
So he can't lose, right? And he's the most powerful, biggest, blah, 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 blah. But he's also the greatest victim in the world. So that's
Yeah, good
his
point.
negative narcissism is nobody
Yeah.
has ever been so
Vic-
abused as me. Nobody has ever been treated so badly as me. Nobody's ever been as betrayed as me. No one has ever been blah, blah, blah. And he said that early on before, you know, and I was going like, yeah, well, what about Mussolini? He was sort of hung by the feet in the central square or something, you know. Really, no one has ever in history been treated as badly as you. That is so that's the other part.
And it
He's
continues.
the greatest, he is the greatest conqueror and the greatest victim.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I forgot about that aspect. Yeah. But whatever I am,
And then,
yeah, go ahead.
do you think that always goes hand in hand with the pathological narcissism?
Good question. I haven't thought about it. But I do know that negative. I think that's true when we talk about ourselves as a species too. I referred to that, and we'll talk about it more.
Yeah.
But it's a form of narcissism to say we're the spoiler species of the world. It's also maybe a form of narcissism to say that we're the bad seed. You know, the matricidal bad seed who's, you know, that's also self-important in a certain way, I think. And there's problems
Right.
with that. So it's also a form of exceptionalism. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That you can be an exceptional victim.
Yeah.
And an exceptional conqueror. But I think in part I've seen narcissism maybe just normal or a little pathological. You know, basically underneath, like you said, the person is empty. They don't actually have a positive sense of self at all. And then my other question was, certainly with your example of Mr. Trump, but in general, is it possible? You said he can't learn. We've seen that. I mean, he's very, very, very stuck in his pathology. But can narcissists learn and come out of it?
So
through therapy or
yeah,
life
sure. There is treatment for narcissism, and it can work. It can work. Trump is beyond any kind of help. You know, if you look at the Hitlers and the Trumps and people like that, they're beyond any help because their strategy is working. And of course, when it doesn't work, then again they go to the greatest victim thing. So yeah, and I suppose it's possible to feel empathy for Trump, but I leave that to bigger people than me.
And interesting that, you know, once it all fell apart for Hitler, he killed himself. And I was also thinking of, what's his name? Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
He killed himself. And I did wonder if, I mean, this is not a very positive thinking process here, but I used to think if you're a pathological narcissist, you couldn't kill yourself. It wouldn't be possible. But if you get to that point that you talked about, where everything is annihilated for you, maybe you can.
So we'll talk about that.
Sociopathic.
We're going to talk about fascism, and we'll talk. That's right on. We'll talk exactly about Hitler, and there's a movie about that. And anyway, we'll be talking more about that. But
and are you going to discuss how narcissism exists in a society? Kind of
the whole class is essentially that. Right? What's narcissism in different realms? So I think capitalism is a form of narcissism. Imperialism is a form of narcissism. Patriarchy, racism, and colonial, you know. Yeah. All right.
I wanted to ask, you thought about if 30 to 35% of Americans are supporting Trump, where is that coming from?
Well,
How do
does
these
that-
people buy into it?
yeah. So that's also a topic I'm going to get into a lot. We can together get into a lot more. My very short version of it is when we talked about evolution, I said my personal summary of our instinctual apparatus is that we feel healthy and good when we experience ourselves as a meaningful, respected, significant, and contributing member of a meaningful whole that is greater than us and that is worthy, that we experience as worthy, and that is ultimately sacred. So I think our
Right.
instincts for having a healthy relationship between self and whole, that's what real community would be, is really powerful. And I think the fact that that's why I think Trump's a symptom. The fact that
My screen is frozen.
Okay, mine or so Viva, can you hear me? Your picture on my screen is frozen, but I don't know if that means you can't hear what I'm saying. So I'll just keep talking. So I think a society that does not meet those basic needs leaves us set up to faux versions of it, to faux belonging. And that's what fascism offers. You're part of a powerful whole. You don't have any power, but you project it on, you have a sense of power because you project it on the all-powerful leader. You get an experience of participating in a powerful whole. And I think that's a very fundamental. Viva, you back?
I'm back.
You back. Did you hear what I said, or should I repeat it?
No, I didn't hear it, but I'll listen to the.
Yeah. Well, so if those needs aren't met to be a meaningful participant in a meaningful whole, then that hunger is there, and you're very vulnerable to faux belonging, to a non-worthy whole. So you get a sense of power and involvement and participation and whatever by being part of a fascist movement. And so that needs much more talking about. But I think that the why a narcissist has that much appeal and potential power is partly because they have skills and charms, but it's also, they're gifted in various ways because they've specialized their skills. But it's partly because the real human needs aren't met by the society as a whole. And that would be part of seeing Trump as a symptom of the generalized narcissism rather than the cause of everything. But that's a discussion I'm looking forward to having and to hearing what everybody has to say about. Because it's so key, right?
I missed the rest of this conversation, Bob. I'm heading out, but I will watch it, and I really wanted to thank you. And I can't help. It's kind of an aside, but the angerness that's happening every day in these killings, you're really making me reflect on what can be done before, a child or young adult or other goes out and kills innocent people at random because of the anger inside of them, and what can we do to help, at that age?
Yeah.
Is there something that can be done to work with that anger? Because for myself, there was a lot of anger in my childhood between my parents, really, and I hated it. And so I disowned that part of myself. So I liked what you said about the shadow work, because I'm not sure what we can do about the killing, although I'd like to learn more about these random shootings. But I like the idea of I don't even call it anger. When I get angry, I call it frustration. I'm frustrated because I can't be angry, right? So I like what you said, that I need to incorporate that and look at that and say, okay, I'm angry and I can manage it. What can I do to manage it? So thank you.
So on that,
Thank you.
people who behave explosively and violently are often thought of as people who they really can express their anger. They really know their anger. They're expressing their anger, but they're actually people who they're not expressing their anger. Their anger, they're people who don't have an acknowledgement or a healthy relationship with their anger. They don't even know their anger. They don't even know their anger. Most of them would say they're not angry. Their anger is completely repressed. And so they don't have a relationship to it. They don't have a conversation between other parts of themselves and their anger. So that anger just builds and builds, and then I just knocked my lamp out. So their anger is explosive because they don't have a relationship with their anger, because their anger is unconscious at that level. So, and it's just seething there without getting any attention or love or whatever else. So here's an idea.
Anger your friend.
Why don't you do some more thinking about it? And I mean, that's a great topic. And why don't you think about it a little more and tell us what you come up with more on the question of how all this relates to these tragic, because I haven't actually gone there in my mind. I mean, it fits in the general thing, but I haven't done specific thinking about the violent stuff.
I
All
could
right.
like real quick say one thing. When I was in Washington visiting this couple, and this child had a temper tantrum, really had emotion. And the short of it was they made it okay. Like you were saying in the conversation that the parents might have had with Trump. And oh my, this kid, he reached decimals I couldn't believe a human being could. And the mother said, it's okay. I love you. I know it's hard to be disappointed. It's okay. And I was shocked. And I said, wow. And she goes, well, of course. But in between the narcissism and the real, the extreme households that some grow up in, all of us to some degree, that's so vacant. I mean, I would have been told to go to a room until I could get myself in order. Like, you're abandoned. You're not good enough for us. Go away and settle it. But to be held. She held him and stroked him. I love you. Wow. I guess, yeah.
Sounds like that was really powerful for you. That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, everyone. I'll see you on video.
All right. I'm going to move ahead a little bit. Is that okay if we do that? And that means I'll put me in the foreground on my screen. So I want to transition to grief. And I'm trying to, I'd have that, and I wanted to do a meditation. I'm a little, well, I think I'll talk about grief and try and have time to do both. But the relationship between narcissism and grief is really, really important. And so I want to talk about the healing power and the redemptive power of grief. Grief is a necessary condition of rebirth. Rebirth can only start from where you actually are, from an acceptance, not necessarily, oh, this is okay, you don't have to like it, but the fact is, here I am, an acceptance and a surrender to where you are right now. And if you can't grieve and you can't accept the loss, and then you can't be present in reality as it is, and you can't move on. And you can't, quote, get over it. So a Trump level narcissist can't accept a loss or a defect, can't grieve it because that would be a weak emotion, and therefore can't grow and can't move on. That's why he's so stuck, right? One of the things that's striking is how stuck he is. He wants revenge. He needs to right a wrong. He can't move ahead until he can erase the unacceptable reality that happened. Everybody has to agree that the reality didn't happen. Then we can move on. And even his Republican right-wing guys are saying, hey, guy, this is getting in the way. Let's move on with our right-wing agenda. So you can't move on until you get free yourself. No, I already said. He can't move until he can somehow manage to erase from his consciousness and hopefully the national consciousness that he lost. I have been volunteering for a couple of years now to facilitate a grief group with Winter Spring, which is a volunteer organization that it's not therapy, it's not professional. It's basically people creating peer groups with facilitators. And as a facilitator of this, I'm not operating as a therapist, but people have asked me, and the group I'm doing right now is breathtaking grief. It's people who have lost a close one to suicide. And in most cases, it's a child. Imagine losing your child to suicide. So it's, and I say this not knowing what your folks' experiences have been, but it's just, I can't breathe when I think about it as a father. It's just unimaginable grief. And so I've been asked, isn't that depressing? Why do you do this? Not necessarily that tone, but wow, that was. And what's interesting is that it has been an inspiring and not a depressing experience. I mean, it's shocking, it's horrifying, but it's not depressing. And I've sort of been wondering why. And I've tried to look at, so what attracted me to this? Why am I doing this? I'm not, most of the people who've done it are people who've had traumatic grief in their life. And I have not. I mean, I've lost my parents. I've had plenty of grief. You can't not have it. And, but I think grief and loss is, you can't be my age without having experienced grief and loss. But I have not had the kind of traumatic grief where just the rug got pulled out from under my life. The foundation of my existence got blown up, as it would have if something happened to my son, as it would if something happened to my son. So, and I've got to consider myself lucky. I've sort of had a lucky life. And I think I was attracted to it because I wanted to be tempered by the fire of grief. I wanted to get, I'm surely glad that I haven't paid the entry fee that the people in the group have played. And I'm very clear on that. That's a very important part of the relationship, is me being clear that I'm not claiming to have had their experience. But grief is intrinsic to life. I will face worse grief than I have so far at some point. And so somehow I think I just want to be hardened a little bit, or I don't know, something about that. And so what it turns out, the things I've learned from this, which has been pretty, very powerful, is one is that level of grief changes you forever. You will not be the same person again. Maybe that's a dramatic way of saying it, but you will never be the same person. You will never be the same. You will be transformed forever. And the part of you that mourns and wants and hopes to be the same, to get over it, will not. And those friends of yours who want you to be the same, the person they've always loved and related to, will have to find a way to deal with the fact that you are not the same person. You've had a transformative experience of grief. And so you've lost yourself as you knew yourself, and your loved ones have lost you as you knew yourself. That's part of why couples who lose kids often don't stay together, because they have not found a way to make their own transition and to be accepting of the way that their mate is transformed. But what's interesting, but the aging and the maturing process itself is a process of loss and gains. And I think I've used this expression before. There's a book I barely read. I read it long ago. Don't even know if I finished it. But the title of it, Bonfire of the Vanities, has stuck with me and as a really good description of the aging process or the growing process. That when the ground is pulled out from under you and you aren't who you were in some way, who am I if I am not? ... Who am I if I am not? Who am I if I'm not beautiful, if I'm not handsome, if I'm not sexy, if I'm not strong, if I'm not athletic, if I'm not professionally successful, if I'm not admired for blah, 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 blah. You know, or if someone I love rejects me, who am I then? Now, the answer to that is, for the narcissist, I'm nothing. If I lose my image, I'm nothing. But to grow as a human being is to always and ongoingly never be the same, not be the same. So when the floor drops out from you and your reasons to accept yourself or be okay with yourself or be okay with life, you are challenged. We are challenged. To contact a deeper source of ourself, a more essential self, a more unconditional self, a less ego-bound sense of self. And so I think the part that's inspiring is how does one find the resilience in oneself? I kind of think that as an older person, I kind of think that the only real virtue is resiliency. The ultimate virtue is resiliency. How can you find a deeper, more unconditional self, a deeper source of yourself, and ultimately a deeper and less conditional immersion in life and a deeper immersion in the love of life? And that, the title of this course is about belonging, essentially a deeper belonging, a deeper way to belong in life as it really is, to be resourced by life, to accept the gift of life as it actually is, including arthritis, to have gratitude and joy for life. So how do you live in joy and gratitude? How do we live in joy and gratitude in a world that is both glorious and horrible, that both nurtures and ultimately dismantles us, at least us in the personal sense? So like everything else, that's about membership in life, not exceptionalism, not an eternal, let me just have a look at my note here. Yeah, so it's not about building pyramids to try in a vain effort to be immortal. But how do you accept your membership in life insofar as everything is an expression of something? Everything is mortal and everything is an expression of something eternal. How do you experience your membership in life in which everything is mortal and everything is an expression of something eternal? And we have time for a slightly shortened meditation. And how this fits in is the basic idea that part of the cure for our exceptionalism is to experience our membership and our belonging in life, our connection with it. And that means contacting life within ourselves, within our own physical and emotional being. That if we're and if we're going to be warriors for nature, then we have to be intimate with it, we have to be resourced by it, and we have to be expressions of it. Understand that we're expressions. All right. So take a few breaths. And so we're going to take the part of you that's planning or worrying or thinking what's next or blah, 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 or what other obligations you have to fulfill today. Tell that part that you are extremely grateful for the job it does for you, that you will be back, and accept its input. But right now you're taking a break. And you and the planning part of you are taking a vacation from each other. And when you're ready, close your eyes and sense in to all the experiences you feel in your body, in your bodily being, that tell you without a doubt that you are a living, pulsating, biological organism. Offer all of those sensations your loving attention. And notice how your attention waters, and see if in some way it shifts or grows or what happens to that sensations as you offer it your respectful and loving attention. And those sensations will be unique to each of us, and they will also vary and change for each of us, perhaps from moment to moment. You may feel life buzzing like a great storm in every part of your body. You may feel it, experience it as a extremely subtle and elusive sensation somewhere in the body that requires your acute attention, like a spring in the desert or a blade of grass growing in the desert. You may experience it as an ache or a pain. You may experience in one part of your body and all over your body. And that may all shift in the course of noticing. But just as there is life outside you, there is life in you. And one way of talking about that is to say that there's a campfire burning in the mitochondria of every one of your cells. That campfire is fed by rivers and streams and rivulets that bring the campfire the resources it needs, that carry away what needs to be carried away. That there are winds of hormones washing and sweeping and blowing through your whole being and reaching every corner and uniting and sending messages from every part of your being to every other part. There is an infinitely complex meshwork of neurons, every one of which is reaching out to other neurons reaching out to each other and forming an intricate network that resources and guides and unites every part of your being. There is. So there's a constant exchanges and conversations and pulsations and rhythms and pulsations that are going on in your body that are they're not part of some other spiritual realm. They're they're the actual living processes, material existing living processes going on, and that are part of you being a living being. And a living being is an incarnation of spirit and matter, an intimate relationship between energy and matter, between the life force and your physical being. Give your attention to the livingness inside you. And in doing so, you are experiencing your relationship to the source of life that nourishes and resources you. And it is your connection to everything else that is equally sourced by the spirit of life. And when you're ready, not quite yet, but when you're ready, open your eyes gradually and see, and I should have set this up, if there's a piece of nature that's visible to you, or an object that is meaningful to you, or anything that is beautiful to you, gradually open your eyes and witness it from your own aliveness. From your own aliveness, witness the aliveness of the world outside you. You slowly can open your eyes with a soft focus to take that in. You can also just imagine it, if that's better for you, right? And feel your resonance with what you're witnessing. And feel how that you are resonating and reverberating and transparent to what you're witnessing. And that your witnessing has an exquisite quality to it because you're in touch with your own aliveness, with your mutual membership with what you're looking at in existence. And when you're ready, see if you can experience what you are looking at as witnessing you back. What is it like to feel yourself, the life in you, as witnessed by the life outside you? Which is to say, respecting the mutual relationship between your livingness and unity between your livingness and the livingness of the world. Let yourself sink into that. And then see, don't do it right away. See if there is some movement or gesture that your body wants to make that acknowledges that relationship. And before doing it, let the impulse grow. Don't move. Let whatever impulse you feel be palpable to you. Let it grow. And when you can't stand it anymore, let that impulse move you. And it might be a tiny gesture or tiny movement, or it might be a large movement. Whatever your body wants to do in acknowledgement of the livingness outside of you and the unity and relationship between you and the world. And when you're done, just stay with that until you feel ready to re-enter this space with this remarkable group of human beings that you share it with. And I'm going to put up what's going on here. I'm going to put up a poem that talks about this. It's a poem by David Wagner. And the poem says, "When lost in the forest, when lost in the forest, stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here." I'm going to start that over again. Stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here. And you must treat it as a powerful stranger. You must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers, "I have made this place around you, and if you leave it, you may come back again," saying, "Here." No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a branch does is lost on you, then you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. I'm going to read it again. When lost, give me just a second. This is wrong. When lost in the forest, stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger. Must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers, "I have made this place around you, and if you leave it, you may come back again," saying, "Here." No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a branch does is lost on you, then you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. So, you can close it out, or people can share a little bit. We've got a couple of minutes if we want it. Well, actually, the thing the line in that strikes me is, and you and you may come back again. If you leave it, you may come back again, saying, "Here." If you leave it, you may come back again, saying, "Here." And that's about the quick and dirty part that I was saying. And also, right, you don't have to walk through the desert on your knees repenting, that Mary Oliver says. You can come back here again, and all you have to do is say, "Here." So my image when I talk about quick and dirty is, it's like there's this place in the forest that's beautiful and that you feel safe in. And the more you go there, you create the path. And the more you visit it, the easier it is to get there. And so you try and get something of a well-worn path so that getting to this place of here of feeling connected or experiencing your belonging is more and more easily accessible, and you can do it between sneezes. So the sneezes I just
Thank
came up
you.
with, that's a new thing, sneezing. Sneezing practice. Maybe I'll write a book on that.
That was beautiful.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it is an honor. Thank you, folks. And I'll see you next week.
Thank you.